Welcome back to Uncharted X. This is Ben, and I hope that you're all doing well. I'm very pleased to bring this video to you. It's something I personally had been looking forward to for quite some time, but I had the chance to sit down in person with someone whom I greatly respect and look up to, someone I'm proud to call a friend, engineer, author, and manufacturing expert Christopher Dunn. I was in Danville, Illinois, late 2023, and we recorded this the day after we were at Danville Metal Stamping doing metrology inspections on a host of ancient hardstone vases from Egypt. I put a video out discussing our findings from that day, link below, so as you might imagine, it was top of mind for Chris and myself. I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you will also. We get into a variety of topics: the vase scan work, precision, a long discussion on tubular drills and Petrie's core number 7, the Serapeum, and we even get into some of the critics and responses to this work, something I know several of you have been waiting to hear. I've added footage and images to the discussion as well as a sidebar commentary section to provide some context, as some of our talk is relevant to the recent debate between Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock on the Joe Rogan Experience. And of course, we get into the details of Chris's incredible new book that came out in January of 2024, Giza, the Tesla Connection. This book is a follow-up to his earlier work, the Giza Power Plant, and having had early access to it, I can only recommend it most highly. I was honoured to have my endorsement included on the back cover, along with Graham Hancock's, and it's a summary of why I recommend it so highly. This is what I wrote. Ahem. A comprehensive engineering-focused hypothesis for one of the world's greatest mysteries. Accounting for the myriad of recent new discoveries surrounding the Great Pyramid, Dunn ties these together with disparate scientific advances into a cohesive and comprehensive explanation for its purpose and function, resulting in mind-bending conclusions and staggering implications. End quote. You can find the book in bookstores as well as on Amazon. Before we get into the conversation, some quick channel updates. I'll be talking about several of these topics at the upcoming Cosmic Summit Conference, June 15 and 16 in Greensboro, North Carolina this year, along with a host of amazing speakers like Randall Carlson, Robert Schoch, Praveen Mohan, Robert Temple, and more. Both livestream and in-person tickets are available, and see below in the description for links. I also seem to get a lot of questions about future tour plans, so I've created a page on my website outlining my rough plans for the coming couple of years, and the best way to register for them when they become available. We're just now finalising the itinerary for the Primordial Egypt tour that I host with Yusuf Aoun, and that'll happen in December of 2024, so stay tuned to my socials if you're interested. Now, onto the conversation with Christopher Dunn. Christopher Dunn, I'm super excited to meet you in person finally. Thanks for coming in and talking for a little bit.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
It's great to see you. Like I've been looking forward to meeting you in person for many years now. You picked a fantastic location for this. We're here in the beautiful Fischer Theater in downtown Danville, Illinois. I understand you had a hand in the renovation project for kind of redoing this place and making it what it is today.
Well, I played a small part in it. It was a large team, but it was quite a process that we went through because the the theater had grown and had fallen into disrepair and had been not been used for about 30 years, and just the odd performances with very limited audience attendees. So and of course there was no heat, no air conditioning. The roof was leaking. Okay, it was in terrible disrepair and and leaking and musty and smelly and cold.
Rats in the basement.
And rats in the basement and bats in the belfry.
Bats in the belfry.
But the history of it goes back to 1884.
Beautiful.
It was an opera house in 1884, and then back then they had the whole vaudeville craze, and so they would have vaudeville here. the old theater and this auditorium actually was heated by coal. They had, yeah. I mean, when we were doing the restoration and tearing the walls down, or the covering on the walls down, we found where these fireplaces.
The old coal fireplaces.
Yeah, right. And there's 4 of them.
Oh, okay.
To heat this space. So, and then of course, the old lighting equipment for the stage.
Yeah.
Everything was kind of like an archaeological dig,
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, I also understand you've done more than just help get it restored here. Your son Alex says that you also played the narrator in a run of the Rocky Horror Picture Show here as well.
Yeah, everybody has their dark side.
I was hoping you brought the wig. I thought there was a wig involved.
Oh, well, yeah, I wanted to look like Einstein.
Okay. Yeah, it's a cool spot.
So I had this crazy wig on, and I played the narrator in Rocky Horror.
You get to say all sorts of dirty words, right?
I was suitably disgusting, I think,
Good stuff.
I think, have you been to a Rocky Horror show?
No, I have not been to the show. I've heard about it.
They have kind of like a cult following.
Yes. Yeah,
and people will travel miles to see a show, a live show, because the interaction between the audience and the cast is dynamic and usually,
a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll bet. Well, yeah, so I'm out here in Danville. This isn't the only reason that I came out here. And for people that are watching, I've been out here a couple of days now, and we were doing some what I would call very interesting work yesterday out at Danville Metal Stamping. We were doing some, I guess, what would you call it, a series of metrology inspections on a collection of ancient Egyptian hardstone vases. Is it metrology inspection the right word for kind of what we were doing out there?
You could call it that. I mean, it's using precision instruments to gather data from a manufactured item. So with the scans being out there and people downloading them and looking at them, we determined that kind of data is arcane and out of reach for most people,
right,
who would be interested in the subject. And so it was determined by the team that it would be beneficial to do a conventional a check, the way we would when I first started in the tool rooms and do a check that way. So essentially the object, the focus was on the roundness, how round the bowls were, or the vases are, and concentric. Right. So it's not just one area of the vase and checking that to see if it's round, but also be checking at the same time other areas of the vase to determine how concentric they are to where you rounded the vase up on a rotary table. Right,
yeah, and I'll put a bit of footage in this when I release this for sure, so people can see the type of thing we were doing. But I mean, I don't want to. I guess it would be hard to overstate it, but this is not something that has really ever been done before on these types of artifacts. I mean, I know we looked at the original vase. People that have seen the vase, the series of vase videos that we've produced, we focused on one vase initially, but in the time since then, we've been lucky enough to have interested people with the means to do so go out and purchase a number of these vases, some with impeccable provenance, going back to the 1800s, and also willing enough to sort of wrap them in bubble wrap and bring them over here to Danville for an inspection. And it's just like, this is not anything that, as far as I know, has really been done on these artifacts before.
Yeah, so at DMS yesterday, we had the two owners of vases, the original vase that was that you have a report by Mark Viston, which was probably some of the most brilliant writing I've read.
Agreed.
Absolutely amazing. And and then Matt Bell, who brought his vases up.
Yep.
And so everybody came together in the inspection department of Danville Metal Stamping and had a lot of fun.
We did.
And the results were mind blowing.
They really were, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. So we talked a little bit about the process. I mean, that involved essentially, we were, as you said, looking at concentricity, roundness. We also were looking at I think, what would you say, consistency of edge and wall thickness was another measurement we were taking.
Right.
But essentially most of the measuring would involve centering the vases on a rotary table on a precision flat surface, and then mounting, precision gauges that were measuring in kind of the half thousandth increments against the surface and rotating it and recording kind of the variance of measurements. But yeah, what did you said the results were momentous. I mean, and this is kind of a word I've heard you use to describe what we did yesterday as well. So what were your takeaways from what we did yesterday and what we saw in terms of the results?
Well, when I relate back to the times that I've been through the Cairo Museum and the conversations that I hear other people having about the Egyptian vases and how extraordinarily precise they look, it's always been in the back of my mind. I'd love to get one of those in an inspection lab.
Yeah.
And check it out, conventionally. And yesterday was the day that we were able to do that. So it was momentous in that I think that it kind of brings down to more of a broader level, a broader group of people, a better understanding of what we're talking about, because there's since the excellent video that you posted on the vase and the commentary followed it, there seemed to be significant misunderstanding about what it means.
Yeah.
And it's like, unless you have some kind of technical background, it's hard to fill in all the gaps, because if you're not, I mean, this is not a criticism of anybody, because not everybody has a background in machining or in tool making or engineering, but there are a lot of interested parties out there who do have some technical education. And so, when you discuss, well, this person is an engineer, right. The question then should be, well, what kind of an engineer is he or her? Are they mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, software engineer, computer engineer? I mean, there are so many different types of engineers. Right. And they all have their own language. They all have their own kind of environmental baked-in knowledge. And one of the issues that flows from that is that when they're communicating information and a concept, generally they don't convey a lot of the basis, a lot of the fundamental knowledge that most people that they work with, they assume they would already have that. Right.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's something I noticed as well. Like, there was a strong reaction to that vase work. I think rightly so, because it's to my mind, it's one of the few times we've seen sort of significant and real advancement in our understanding of some of these ancient artifacts. And I would consistently see that the people that are mechanical or metrology focused engineers, the machinists, the guys that work on instruments that, they have to understand those basic principles, they sort of immediately get it. Right. And you'd see that, but then you'd see other people that don't have that background, that I think you called it arcane, kind of a black art with some of the scan results and the way it gets talked about. Yeah, I saw that as well with it, and I think there's also some of that's gone into I think a misunderstanding of some of it might have gone into some of the sort of even the criticism that comes from this. Although it's hard to criticize these absolute results, and I do think that that's where some of the work we were doing yesterday, or you guys were doing, and I was just observing, will really help along those lines, because you're seeing real numbers. We're not like creating models of anything. We're actually measuring the real surface of these vases at scales that are kind of mind-blowing, like, we're talking single-digit thousandths
Right.
of an inch. And just as a reminder, I've said it before, and we even measured this and got this on video, was that, you can, and we measured, I pulled out some hair of on my head, and we measured like the thickness of a human hair being around 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch. Yeah. Stuck it on Alex here stuck it on the table, and we put a gauge on it, and you could see that thickness, and we're talking about basically a similar depth of precision, where it's like less than the width of a human hair on these vases and in the measurements we're getting, which is just astonishing. So.
Yeah, well, it's not unusual for people who work in manufacturing to occasionally pull their hair out.
I'll bet. Well, watching you guys try to center some of the vases was, I was like, yeah, I couldn't see how some.
Well, it's a delicate thing.
Yeah. Center. I mean, that's the whole process does involve, like, you got to get that vase centered on that rotary table, which in itself can, there's lots of different factors you've got to put into this. But yeah, I'll bet there's plenty of times when you want to pull your hair out in machining, for sure. But
when you talk about the arcane, and we're talking about the technologies that have evolved since I retired, which was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they were just being introduced into manufacturing. We're talking about the structured light scanning, white light, blue light.
Yep.
And so, as that has evolved, my son Alex has evolved with it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
And so it was natural for me to want to rely on the old tried and true that I knew in the past.
Yeah. Well, I think, I do think, though, it does help just where you've got these absolute numbers on gauges and you're seeing the physical process in action. I think that's going to help a lot of people to kind of grasp what it means. But it's sort of a question I have, and it's one that I am trying to figure out a good way to explain too, is like, because, and I'll do a full video, we'll talk about the results we got into yesterday, but certainly several of these vases were just remarkable, like mind-blowing in their, what you would call precision. Like,
and we can talk all day about it, but just a very short 3-minute video will tell people who understand these kind of things everything they need to know about them.
Yeah, and for everyone else, sort of the question I do have about that, and we'll put that video in, is like, so when you see numbers like that, like 1, 2, 3 thousandth of an inch, what's an analogy? What does that mean in the real modern world, in our daily lives? Like, where do we see that type of precision? What might it be used in? Like that, when we're in our modern manufacturing process, what are we doing that gets down to those levels of precision?
Yeah, when you go down to around 1 to 2,000, you're at machinist tolerances. Tool makers, gauge makers, generally, tool makers work within 2 10,000ths of an inch, something like that.
Okay.
And then gauge makers, if you're making a gauge to actually check a tolerance, the precision of that, or the tolerance of that, has to be like about 10% of the tolerance of the piece that you're going to check.
So 10 times.
So you can go from like 50 millionths in craft trades.
Yeah.
You can go from like working to within 50 millionths or 20 millionths of an inch to 1,000ths of an inch, or 2 10,000ths of an inch, 1,000ths of an inch. Right. 2,000ths of an inch is achievable, with regular machines.
Right.
And when we look at the results of those inspections on those vases, we can see that they don't actually achieve the precision of what I consider to be micro machining.
Right.
That we have, where it's like the indicator will waver a little bit.
Yes.
Generally, that is reflective of the bearings that it is being rotated on. So
okay.
Obviously, if you're talking about a precision of 2,000ths of an inch and a consistent kind of concentricity down the whole piece, that is actually tied to a datum, such as the top surface, which is what we used as a flat plane, the datum to sit them on. I mean, you're talking about machine technology.
Yeah.
Now, when you consider the machine technology, you can go from, okay, we think of a potter's wheel. There's absolutely no way, no way that those vases could be made on a potter's wheel.
Right.
There's no way. An old lathe, if you going back to, when I entered the shops, yeah, possibly. But the bearings are not necessarily a function, or the reflection of the bearings on the measurements is not necessarily related to the type of machine or its the time in history when it was made available for craftsmen to use, but it could be related to how it has been used or abused, and the condition of the bearings and whether it's been maintained.
Yeah.
So there all these factors go into consider. You have to take them all into consideration.
That's a good point, and it's one I want to talk a little bit more about, because it's like I one of the things I've seen that's come out of this vase discussion that I consider encouraging is that we're the discussion has moved away from like were they made by hand to almost to a point where even the critics of it I've heard say, well, yeah, they must have, like they did it on a lathe, they must have turned it on a lathe to get there. But it's like we're not talking about a lathe that has components made of wood or something that you're spinning by hand or you're holding.
Yeah,
because it's hard stone like this. We're forgetting about the material involved in this. Like it's a point that you've made, and I know in the reports they've been made, and certainly Mark Kvist in his excellent piece made, is that you need like bearings and set screws and rods that are also precision manufactured in order to achieve these levels. This isn't just a simple, well, okay, they were turning it. Like if just admitting that they're turning it isn't enough to explain.
Yeah, I mean, you have to consider that. Yeah, you have wood lathes and you have metal lathes. And
yeah,
on a wood lathe, you hold the tool in your hand.
In your hand on a mechanical tool
on a rest, and then you shave off the wood. On a metal lathe, that tool is held rigidly in place.
Right.
And is guided by the axis of the lathe.
Yeah, and either on a computer or not. And it's and a metal lathe is about the closest thing you're going to find as an equivalent to working the types of stones, the ridiculous types of stones that we see these vases made out of. Like yesterday we had ones that were, diorite, porphyry, certainly granite. I mean, we had a beautiful set of three. We finally got together the original rose granite piece and then the other two that were also looked like they came from the same mother rock. I mean, it was this beautiful set of three of them, and they just also happened to be some of the most precise vases we looked at all day.
Yeah.
I mean, people forget that the material itself is an amalgam of, almost microscopic elements of different hardness. In granite, it goes from mica to silica to hornblende to, quartz, rock crystal, and it's, it varies all over the place. So, and we did see some of that reflected in even sort of, you do get the odd surface imperfection on these vases, and not to mention the fact they're also at least 5,000 years old and they've been weathered and damaged in spots. But yeah, just to be the idea that you can consistently maintain levels of precision of, in the single digit thousandths of an inch working in that material, the machines and the tooltips required to do so would be, I mean, it's,
yeah, I mean, just one of the areas of the bowl that we checked, which was kind of like a little flat, like you take the original bowl and you flatten it so it bulges out.
The little spin.
And the indicator was put on the top, close to the crown or the top, which would be the base. But, and so it's actually between the largest dimension on it, which is the outside diameter, right?
Yep.
And then the center, and right there, it is affected by two axes of movement. If there is error in the vertical error or a horizontal movement, then it will be reflected in the indicator reading. And even that tracked within, 3,000ths of an inch, which is actually mind-blowing when you consider it.
Yeah, it really is. And again, I just, to reinforce it, let's not lose sight of the idea that given these are pre-dynastic, and a lot of them in early dynastic Egypt, but certainly pre-dynastic Egypt, and where they're generally attributed, when we say pre-dynastic, they say like 3,500 to around 4,000-ish BC, before the first pharaoh of the first dynasty came out. I mean, the explanation for how these are made, I mean, there's no wheel in the Old Kingdom. I mean, it's like literally dudes banging on them with rocks and sand and sticks. I mean, it's a huge conundrum, I think, to the story of what was going on at that period of time. But one thing else that I kind of wanted to mention here when we're talking about these vases and these levels of precision is to maybe correct another misconception that I've heard as well, is the idea that we couldn't do it today. I think, I mean, you and I, we talked about this earlier. It's like that's not true. Like we have tremendous capabilities in our processes and machining. We can certainly go well beyond the levels of precision we're seeing here. Is it right to say that we generally don't do it in the same way that we don't make Serapeum boxes? We don't really make these types of granite artifacts to this level of precision, mostly because it would just simply be cost prohibitive. Like it'd be very expensive to try and do.
My observation has been that most of the people who claim that these artifacts can't be made today are really not. They don't know what modern engineers are capable of, or modern craftsmen are capable of. And so I think it's wrong to claim that. I never claim it.
Yeah, no, neither do I.
At all. And so, because that I think would be disrespectful to, a whole class of workers. And to say that, oh, you can't do this. Well, sure, watch me. I'd be like, yeah.
I'm hoping somebody takes us up on
well,
that.
that is I think the next step. I mean, I hope that some company that becomes interested enough and who believes that they have the machining or the machine technology and the tool technology to be able, and also the computer-guided CAD/CAM systems to be able to create one. Because one thing that we didn't mention, and one thing that really blew me away, it's not just the precision on the outside of these vases, but the inside. And checking the wall thickness and finding that the wall thickness on this one vase was within 2,000ths of an inch.
What was that?
It's
just
like,
zeroed out?
It's 2,000 maybe.
No, it's closer than that. It's like almost 1,000.
I'd say each line is 1,000. So
Maybe 2,000.
About 2,000.
You could get 2,000.
remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, consistent, right? Yeah.
That would make anybody sit up and take notice.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about the consistency of the wall thickness, measuring it in different locations on the vase, right? It's within 2,000ths of an inch of being consistent. And in terms of over absolute wall thickness, one of these vases was like between 2 and 4 millimeters.
Yeah.
In terms of just overall thickness. And it's also, granite, it's translucent, letting light through.
You're right at the spot where it gets to the thinnest part of the wall. There's a band that goes around here. This one.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking to find is the low spot. Right, so that's 83,000. Around 90 degrees.
Which is a really good. I haven't seen
At 84,
83.
83 again.
Yeah. Oh, there's a low spot there. It's got it's like a dip in the.
It dips down to 80.
Yeah, like a divot, you know.
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went thinner there. Who knows why?
Well,
It's right on that piece of quartz. It looks like on the.
yeah, something might have ripped out while they were machining it.
Well, no, they did it on purpose. I mean,
Oh,
it's, yeah, it's a consistent like V-shaped indentation all the way around the thing. But it's not just a little bit. It's actually like it I don't know what the word is. Yeah, it's a consistently shaped divot all around.
Really? Okay.
And it's right where the light is able to escape it. So,
Huh.
yeah, that's where the band of light is the brightest, is right where they made it thinner.
Oh.
Yeah, you've seen it there too.
Oh, there's a groove in there.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a V-shaped groove around there. Yeah, it's running around
Yeah.
80.
Where's that flash?
Yeah. Okay. Wonder if that was an accident or intentional.
So that's where you can see the lower from the outside. The thinnest part is this band that goes all the way up.
You gotta get it sent, yeah, you gotta get it sent out. Cause that was really promising until it.
Okay, so there are several grooves as it gets towards the top.
Yeah. There are
Yeah.
grooves in it.
All right. So I want to get out of the groove. I don't want to be in the groove.
If you go lower, you move past all of that.
Yeah. All right, so we're at 83.
Again?
So out of the groove was
How
80.
far I can go with that.
With the
It
groove.
gets
the
thicker
groove
at
is
the
80?
bottom, obviously. So
I think out of the groove's 83, and then in the groove is 80.
80, yeah. So it's just about 3 pounds depth. And that area right there is the thinnest part in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think as far as round, concentricity, well, wall thickness anyway, we know what the concentricity is, but the wall thickness is
Very consistent. In the
Still
middle.
almost 1,000.
Up to what?
About 1,000.
A thou.
thousandths of an inch, I would say.
All right. Pretty consistent. Pretty consistent.
You know, I'd like at this time to honor our ancestors.
Yeah.
Can't go to Egypt and not be blown away by what they accomplished.
No, this one's insane.
Yeah.
Fucking insane.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll just start logging these into Excel today.
See? Yeah, impossible.
Yeah.
Well, not impossible, obviously.
Expensive.
Expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
that's-
an amazing piece.
Unbelievable. Because, and you know, we were there. We had, I think it's Judd Peck he's the current CEO of
Yeah, Judd is the CEO and chairman of Danville
Chairman of
Metal Stamp.
Danville Metal Stamping was there. His son also, and you know, we're doing these inspections, and all of a sudden Judd ran off home. He's like, I've got to go and get some stuff. He had a few like modern marble vases, like these
Right.
beautiful. I mean, obviously marble's
Beautifully
softer than granite,
turned, yeah.
but beautifully turned and you know polished and smooth like glass. And so we put them in there and we inspected them, and they'd been turned and they're quite accurate on the outside, but there's just a if you just look on the inside, I mean, it's very, there's a world of difference in terms
Right.
of the precision of the old vases to the new, and one of them was, yeah, the inside, it's just like it's purely, no one cares about the inside of these things. It's just like what it looks like on the outside is what's important. But
Right.
yeah, really good comparison point, I thought.
No, it was a good group of people there. You had
It
you had the chairman of the board, you had the executive vice president of Danville Metal Stamping, Gardner Peck.
Yeah, Gardner Peck.
You had vice president of manufacturing, Tom Neal.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of horsepower there.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I very much appreciate the opportunity to kind of be a fly on the wall and annoy people with my camera waving it about. But I think
actually, I thought you were quite well behaved.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I tried. Yeah, I'm not going to offer my opinion
Can't
in
say
things
the
that I don't
same
have
for
expertise
myself.
in. Yeah, well, you kind of got the run of the place. I think you earned that after whatever 25 years of working there.
Or more than that, but
Well, more than that. Okay. Yeah.
But one point that I was talking to Matt Bell about it. He's the one that brought his his vases up from Florida. I said, I bet you didn't really even think about it when you were flying up here, that you were carrying with you artifacts that were more precise than some of the parts that fit into the engines.
Yeah.
I mean, you put it in that context, and it's like, holy crap.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overestimate. And one thing I always struggle with is, it's like, okay, so we have these vases and we're seeing these incredible results, and I think, even though we've only at this point, and I say only, it's the first time anyone's done anything like this, but we've extended our data set from one to now many vases. We've probably scanned a dozen or thereabouts, and we're getting more scan results. We're getting CT scans, like down to the micron level kind of resolution. We're doing some of these inspections on them. We're seeing these results. It's like, one thing I always struggle with, and I'd love to, if you have any thoughts on this, are these functional? Are they just vases, or are they simply the result of a manufacturing system that is capable of producing precision? I really understand this argument, and this is kind of how I probably learned this from you as well. Is this is how you kind of can describe the precision we see in statues? It's difficult to make an argument that a statue is functional, but in the same way that our toasters are really good today, because they're made, it's just that's the result of a manufacturing system that developed that precision for a functional reason somewhere else. Do you think that do you think these vases are purely the result of that manufacturing system, or do you suspect or even speculate that they potentially had a functional purpose?
Yeah, that's interesting, and you can speculate all day, but until you go back in time and talk to the originators or the creators and say, what do you have in mind for these when you made them? It's just going to be speculation, right? And it's like, I mean, you could say, well, they held potpourri, or they
perfume,
somebody's doobie,
or they were shot glasses. Some of them. I saw you attempting that with one of them. Yeah,
that was the little one.
Yeah, the little one. Yeah, there's a little basalt
drinker.
one that was just about the right size, about an ounce or so. We were just talking briefly about Petrie's core number 7.
Right.
It's like this thing's got such a long history. I mean, what are we up to? 160 plus years now of debate about Petrie's core number 7. I'm of the opinion that you kind of conclusively put that one to bed a while back with the test that you did.
Right.
But it's been it continues to be the source for much discussion. I know I think you have some either updates or some media surrounding that thing. I can give people, or you could give people, a brief overview of the people that are involved in that and what's happening with core number 7. Obviously, we'd love to scan it and provide more data at a higher resolution, perhaps, than's happened in the past. But that continues to be an interesting artifact.
Actually, it's I think the least important artifact that we discuss.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, it's just a piece of scrap, right?
It is, technically that's what it is.
It's a core. They were more interested in having a hole than
they were in
the
core.
It.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
They just threw that
on the ground.
On the ground, so they'll move on to the next hole.
Mm-hmm.
And now here it is, blown up all out of proportion. I mean, it's become absolutely ridiculous. And if you go back to the history of it, I wrote about it in in 1984. It was published in Analog magazine.
That's right.
So it's published in Analog in 1984, August issue of 1984, in an article entitled Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt. And I had a question mark at the end of that, right?
Yes, I remember.
Right. So, so since 1984, I've had pushback on my analysis of this core, or actually Petrie's original analysis of it. It was my interpretation of it, and as a manufacturer, I was fascinated by the features that Petrie described, and that was a spiral groove that wrapped around the core, and with a 100,000 per revolution advancement of the tool.
Right.
So a feed rate of 100,000ths of an inch.
Yeah, so it's 1 in. Yeah, was it a 1 in 60? Was what he
Yes,
ended up,
yeah.
and you, I think you figured out it wasn't quite that. It was a little.
Well,
less,
it kind of wanders around. I mean, and eventually, Petrie described it as a drunken screw.
Yeah.
Because it kind of meanders. So if you have like a perfect spiral, perfect helix, then this kind of wanders back and forth as it goes around.
Yeah.
And my analysis, I think the only method that I can think of, and I had consulted with my co-workers about it because they were fascinated with it too. And we both independently, or one particular toolmaker and I, independently came up with the same method to create it, and that was ultrasonics.
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially, you're talking about drilling holes in granite, and conventionally, if you're using a diamond drill, the advancement of the drill would be maybe 2/10,000ths of an inch per revolution.
Right.
With the drill going 900 RPM. So, so that was like 500 times greater in penetration rate.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that
It was spinning at 900. Right.
It doesn't mean it was spinning 500 times faster.
No.
It's just the penetration rate.
Yeah.
And so the action of material removal was oscillation of a drill, and so it's kind of like sonic machining. And sonic machining is a method. It's real. It exists.
Yes.
But I was kind of relating back to another method when I thought about it, and that was EDM, electrical discharge machining, because when you can actually drill and tap a threaded hole in a piece of carbide, not conventional tools, but with electrical discharge machining.
Yes.
And
We saw a couple of those machines yesterday, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there are ways to do it, but it involves the rotation of an electrode that has a thread on it, and the rotation is equal, in the nut, it's equal to that the pitch of the thread, so
Right.
it leaves that impression in the metal.
Okay.
So then you go to ultrasonics, where you have the penetration of the granite with a tool. It's advancing into the granite by the action of a rotating tool that has a thread on it,
Mm-hmm.
a bolt on it, and it's threading through a nut. So it's actually
Pushing.
advancing at a specific rate.
Right.
Right. And eventually I actually suspended my assertions that it was ultrasonics.
I remember that.
That was after actually examining it. I said, well, I need to back up on this. So, but that seemed to have put the cat among the pigeons as far as, the conventional kind of historians or archaeologists, heavily mocked and criticized for that.
Yeah.
And I'm just asking the question,
That's right. Yeah.
But essentially, that evolved when a book was published in, I think it was 1999. It was called Giza, the Truth.
Uh-huh.
And they presented their own examination of the core, and claimed that it was a horizontal groove rather than a spiral groove.
Yep.
And and so when I looked at the photograph that they displayed in their book, I thought, well, the core looks like it's tilted a little bit, which would
Yeah.
throw off the their observations, I think. So,
I recall.
but at least I knew by reading that book where the core existed, because before then I'd never had it in my hands. I didn't know where it was located. And living in the Midwest, I was probably somewhere in England, but I don't know where.
Yeah.
But now I'll find out that it was in the Petrie Museum. And so then I made arrangements to go there, and in 1999, around 99, 2000, I said, well, I've got to go, and I've got to get my hands on it, and I've got to determine whether Petrie was correct when he said that the spiral, it was an actual spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And what method would I use? And so my imagination was going, well, what do? You fix it in a chuck and rotate it, and and all of these kind of complicated methods were going through my mind on how I would examine that spiral groove. And then suddenly I was like, just a piece of cotton thread.
Yeah.
Simple, easy, foolproof. Well, you would think, because come to find out, after I published what I found, it wasn't foolproof, because there was a lot of people out there who didn't believe it.
It is, however, repeatable, and
It
I
is
know it's been
repeatable.
repeatable and it has been repeated by quite a number of people. In fact, somebody, I think even this year or last year, went there and organised a research appointment to do it. I saw that on Facebook. It was done as recently as last year, I think. I'd hoped to do it, but the place
You're
was
talking
shut.
about Eric Wilson?
Was it last year? Somebody?
I think it was 2019 when he.
Maybe not. I think there was somebody else. It was more recent than that.
And
that said-
they used a cotton thread.
Yep.
And
they, same result. Like, they followed the grooves and it came out as a spiral. Like,
right.
they posted about it. I saw it on Facebook, and
It'd be nice to know who they are. And
I'll
get
find out
their
for you.
research data.
I'll dig it up.
Because so that's one. So you have Petrie, who's the original,
That's
that
right.
originated.
Yeah.
I inspected it and found it to be a spiral.
Yep.
And then in 2019, while I was there,
Somebody else with you, right?
I had a geologist with me. His name was Malcolm McClure. Malcolm McClure.
Yeah, Malcolm McClure,
yeah.
right. He also did it.
He was retired from British Petroleum. And so he did it, and he wrapped it around 16 times,
Yeah.
and he put it down, and I said, well, what do you think, Malcolm? And he said, I'm speechless.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting, though, that as a geologist, when we were talking about the various methods of checking whether it's a spiral or not, he came up with the idea of taking images of it at various places around, rotating the core, taking a photograph, rotating it, taking a photograph, rotating it, taking a photograph, and then splicing all the photographs together so that you have a full 360, right?
Yep.
And he sent me the results, and I was like, well, thinking, as a means of conveying geometric data to a customer as a manufacturer, that would not be acceptable, and because you have too much room for error. For one, just the splicing everything together is one thing, but also you are looking at a three-dimensional object. And you're looking at a series, if you look down, you're looking at a series of crowns, right?
Right.
And so everything about it is pretty much doomed. An inspection report showing something like that they don't exist, because we don't do that.
That type of thing.
One of the related kind of technologies that we use in aerospace would be to create jet engines, rockets, all kinds of engines. They have a myriad of cones, truncated cones, different sizes, diameters, lengths, heights, modified, you name it. So generally, something that is cone-shaped in an engine will start out as a flat blank.
Right.
And then it is cut as a flat blank, and then you join it together, weld it. Sometimes in the past, before the invention of laser or EDM, or they would actually cut some features in the flat blank.
Right. Before they.
And then when it was rolled and welded, those features would assume the geometries that are necessary to be seen in a three-dimensional object rather than a two-dimensional object. And so there's kind of changes in dimension, different things like that. So all of those factors come into play when you're considering what method you're going to use to check geometric features on a cone. So Malcolm, it was fine. I mean, I have no problem with him wanting to check that way because I understand that when a geologist looks at a core, he's looking at different information,
right,
that is based on his knowledge, his training, and it's not necessarily geometry or stuff like that. He's looking at the geology of it, not the geometry of it. Well, then 2019, Eric Wilson, aerospace engineer, and his colleague Josh Greer got an appointment to go in the Petrie Museum, and they checked the core with the thread, and they said, "Yeah, it's spiral." He wrapped it around 12 times, and he said, "I got bored." So this is kind of like, everybody's excited about this core just because somebody said, "Well, hey, it's a spiral." No, it can't be a spiral. Why can't it be a spiral? Oh, well, you know why it can't be a spiral.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying with Alex earlier. It's like it's the implications of what that means and it presents this challenging problem. That's why it can't be a spiral.
Right, it can't be a spiral because then
the only way to do it's grinding, right? Yeah.
Right. So Stock's research becomes null and void.
Yeah.
The whole concept of how the ancient Egyptians crafted their arguments becomes null and void.
Yeah, it's the house of cards. I think at some point starts to crumble with these basic assertions. But yeah, well, the other thing that I think people. I mean, you also had, or the Petrie Museum did this, maybe they did it and they sent it to you when they made the latex mold. So going with that truncated cone, like when you lay it out on a flat surface.
Right.
Did you suggest that to them to make a latex molding of it? And then...
Yeah, I wanted the latex mold, specifically with the objective of slicing it and being able to examine it in 2D.
Yeah.
And so
that's what you did in the book.
Basically, that's what I did. I met with the museum curator, Dr. Stephen Quirky, who was a very, very nice man, very accommodating, and for a price, he agreed to have a latex mold made and send it to me, and I received, I think it was like that around 2003 when I did that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was. It was definitely a spiral.
Yeah, that to me it was conclusive evidence at that point. Like it's literally geometric proof that it's a spiral's right here in front of you. Like it's laid out step by step. I'm baffled that it's still an ongoing.
Well,
thing,
a lot of people confuse themselves when they I don't know, for whatever reason, ideology or whatever, they can't accept it.
Yeah, perhaps.
And so, they will argue against it. And when you consider it, though, it's not the most cleanest and perfectly drilled hole that you.
No.
It's a mess.
I
would say it's just an ugly mess, because it shows that this drill, it was done fast and dirty, you know. They were just
Hammering
popping
and
holes in the granite the fastest way possible, without regard to fit or finish. I mean, they just wanted a hole in there.
Yeah, I'd love to see it repeated. I mean, honestly, it's like people think it's like Petrie's core number 7's the only one that's really been looked at. But I know, I mean, I've browsed the archives of the Petrie Museum. They've got a half a dozen other cores in there that seem, just from the eyeball, show deep grooves. I'd love to see them inspected.
Well, Eric actually checked some others in the museum while he was there.
Just with the cotton thread?
Yeah, with a cotton thread, and he found that they were spiral.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
Lucas and Harris in their book describe other cores that are spiral.
Okay.
Besides the
Excellent.
Peach core number 7.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people think that it's just one core.
No, it's not. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and even though I know photogrammetry is a tough method, I happened to, one of the last trips I was in Egypt with, I had some people with us that were real experts in this and took hundreds of photographs of drill holes, and they've reconstructed really high resolution 3D images of these holes from, you know, hundreds of these images, and it I think it's at the resolution where it looks like you could potentially show that there might be a matching pattern with some of these holes, like the ones at Abu Sir, which is riddled with, you know, the holes from these cores. And it'd be interesting to, I'm yet to do that work to see if there's a way to do. I mean, ultimately, I'd like to see a molding made of those holes too, because you could pretty much do the same thing.
Right.
But yeah, I at least I have these 3D scans, these super high resolution scans that have been created from portions or even sort of complete holes from where we could get at them.
Right.
We might be able to show something there. I mean, I think it's research that's yet to happen, but it's moving forward. I think it's a good thing. So.
Yeah.
And
there's so much to look at, though. I mean,
there is.
What do you want to spend your time looking at? What excites you today?
Yeah. Well.
I'm going to add a little postscript commentary here, as this discussion about the spiral groove on cores like Petrie's number 7 is an important topic, and I want to add some context for what you're going to see next. Chris shared with me a brief interview he conducted with the aforementioned Eric Wilson, an aerospace engineer and friend of Chris's, who also visited the Petrie Museum in London to inspect drill cores, and is someone eminently qualified to comment on the engineering and manufacturing aspects of artifacts like them. After that, Chris and I get into a discussion about some of the critics and skeptics that have commented or produced content about our work and observation on this core. If you want the whole story of Petrie's core number 7, check out my full-length documentary on ancient Egyptian drill cores, linked in the description box below. But as we mentioned in the conversation, the key point here is the obvious fact that this core, rightly identified by Chris as nothing more than a piece of scrap, has a deep spiral groove, a witness mark to the process that created it. Any engineering analysis of this spiral groove quickly leads to some very interesting and challenging conclusions. That it was evidently cut with some sort of advanced process that penetrated into granite, an extremely hard stone, at rates around 500 times greater than those achievable by our own machines and processes used to create similar holes today. Obviously, these conclusions, or even the mere questions that are raised by the spiral groove observation, are tremendously challenging to the standard model of history, which asserts that not only was everything we see in ancient Egypt done by the dynastic Egyptians, but was done with very primitive methods indeed. Primarily, these holes and cores are explained by a simple grinding process using copper tubes, sand, and a bow drill. Of course, while these methods certainly do work, in that you can grind a hole into granite with them, they take a very long time, days of work to cut a small, shallow hole, and more importantly, they leave very different witness marks in the stone. Grinding effectively polishes the core and drill hole through the seemingly endless back and forth abrasive motion, or depending on the specific abrasive substance used, it might leave very fine, very faint horizontal scratches on the stone. What it doesn't do, however, is leave a deep spiral groove as a witness mark. Because of the implications of a spiral groove on the drill core, the so-called mainstream has never, ever admitted that it is in fact a spiral groove. Any discussion of Petrie's core number 7 in those circles or in the textbooks that they produce will always be labelled as having horizontal or concentric lines or striations. Here's a 1983 study into drill cores, specifically looking at Petrie's findings on core number 7, that simply calls its grooves concentric. And in fact, the word spiral never actually appears anywhere in the article, despite Petrie himself describing it as such. This study, strangely, claims victory by experimenting by grinding into granite with different mediums and looking at the results under a microscope. Yet it seems to me that instead, it effectively demonstrates just how different the results are from a grinding process when compared to core number 7. These images are their results of grinding into granite, and you can clearly see the fine circular striations versus the deep spiral groove that's present on core number 7. Chris Dunn himself got a similar result of a polished drill core when he ground out a hole in granite with a copper tube and grinding compound. Chris already mentioned the tilted drill core photograph in the book Giza the Truth, which, if we're generous, was possibly a mistake. Less generously, though, how else to explain it as anything other than a subtle and somewhat nefarious attempt to make the obvious spiral groove appear horizontal when viewed on the page? Even Dennis Stocks, the experimental Egyptologist who claims to have solved ancient Egyptian engineering challenges with simple tools, and who worked with Mark Lehner to produce several documentaries on the topic, refuses to admit that the groove is a spiral. Detailing his experiments in his book Stoneworking Technology in Ancient Egypt, he claims that his efforts produced, quote, horizontal striations similar to the ancient ones on rose granite, end quote. Close-up images of Dennis Stock's granite core, produced by his experiment, don't seem to be available, but even in the low-quality image in his book, and as he waves it around in the low-res documentary footage, it doesn't seem to look anything like Petrie's core number 7.
Yes. That could be Fourth Dynasty, Dennis.
A quick reminder that these experimental, small, shallow holes that produce small, short drill cores, taking days of effort to cut, are a far cry from the ancient evidence we can find on the sites and granite of Egypt itself. There are literally dozens, if not hundreds, of examples to be found, from small, repeated and overlapping drill runs into the edge of this granite box in the Cairo Museum, probably a half-inch or so in diameter, right up to colossal holes in the 9-inch or greater size. Look at those used to make this small box. Or this one, which is found in the central granite structures at Karnak Temple. Recently, while inspecting a massive granite arch at the boundary of Karnak, we found what might be the largest drill hole I've ever seen. I'd estimate at least 20 to 24 inches in diameter, at the very top of the span. Imagine what it might take to cut that hole with your copper tube and sand. And then how exactly are you snapping the core out of it? Some of these ancient drilled holes are also quite deep, and many show similar striations to Petrie's core number 7. For example, here's a hole in the granite block at the entrance to the Great Pyramid of Giza, found just below the chevrons, one of several very long holes that have been made into this one block. Here are some more, found in the granite block that's now lying at the bottom of the pit in the subterranean chamber far below the Great Pyramid. I'm happy to say that through the use of photogrammetry, many of the drill holes found in places like these, as well as those of Abu Sir, have been scanned and modelled with striations clearly visible, and I fully intend to utilise modern software to unwind these striations and find out if they, as I suspect they do, also form spiral grooves. But when it comes to these questions, and the differences between the ancient examples and the modern experimental results, it doesn't seem like Dennis Stocks is really willing to engage on the topic. Here's a brief clip of Chris Dunn talking with Marcus Allen, the UK editor of Nexus magazine, when he had the chance to ask Dennis Stocks about core number 7.
Sussex Egyptological Society, which is my local Egypt society here in the UK in Sussex.
Right, I forget the year.
Yeah, they have 3 venues that they use alternately, so they cover the whole of Sussex. They have quite a lot of members, several hundred members. Yeah. And I was aware from their publications that Dennis Stocks was going to give a presentation. And I thought, and I'd heard about the work that he'd been doing in Egypt with his copper saw and his drill. And I thought, I've got to listen to this guy. And I emailed you just before that talk, and you said, ask him about the core number 7, the Petrie core.
Yeah, I sent you an image, as I recall.
That's right.
And I asked you to ask him if his core, which I couldn't get a good picture of it, to ask him if his core looked anything like this. I mean, I wasn't being a smartass or anything like that. I was just curious if his core looked like the one that was in the Petrie Museum. So.
Well, I showed him after the talk, after the Q&A, we all milled around as you do after talks, and I approached Dennis and asked it. I showed him the picture, and I said, did your core look similar in any way to this core? Now, he obviously knew what I was showing him.
Mm-hmm.
He turned around and walked away. He wouldn't discuss anything. He wouldn't even acknowledge I showed him a picture.
Really?
So, hopefully this little sidebar provides some context as to just why it's so important to establish and confirm that it is a spiral groove on core number 7. As I said in the interview, I think the door was firmly closed on this issue with the latex mold analysis. As you'll hear from Eric Wilson, the same spiral groove also exists and has been confirmed on other cores housed in the Petrie Museum, ones that I also hope to inspect at some point in the future. This also gives some background as to the frankly absurd lengths some people have gone to in order to try and deny this simple, repeatable, observable fact. For what it's worth, the nonsensical, frankly ridiculous approach taken by some of the more vocal critics of the analysis of core number 7, specifically those ones that you'll see being discussed by Chris and Eric, were referenced by Flint Dibble in the recent debate with Graham Hancock on JRE when the subject briefly came up. This is an approach based on photographs of the core that are then all stitched together, and it's an approach where you're limited to the perspective of the camera, which changes the visible angle of lines as you look up or down from the lens point. Now, clearly, Flint is not an engineer, and he doesn't claim to be, but I wonder what he'd say if he knew just how truly ridiculous these processes and claims made by skeptics are from an engineering standpoint. Or is it more likely he's just agreeing with them and promoting them on JRE because they support his overall perspective, in which he simply ignores or dismisses any of the significant and valid technological evidence for sophisticated ancient capability, far exceeding the tools and techniques known to be used by the dynastic Egyptians? Watch and decide for yourself. Here's Chris talking with aerospace engineer Eric Wilson, and after that we'll return to my discussion with him.
So let's get to our favorite subject, or maybe our least favorite subject now, which is the Petrie core number 7.
Right.
And tell us about your interaction with
Yeah.
that.
So
you
I
have
had,
some experience
I
there,
had the
right?
opportunity to go to London, and I had some time, and I wanted to go to the British Museum there, and the Petrie Museum. And I learned from you actually that you can't get into the Petrie Museum to see the good stuff, the Petrie core and specific artifacts, unless you fill out a request form, a request for those pieces and a date and a time and a schedule. You have to be scheduled in to be there at a specific time, but that was okay. We could fit it in to our visit.
But you also have to be credentialed too, right?
You have to have a reason. You can't just walk in off the street and request pieces from the archive.
Right.
You have to have credentials. Yeah, you have to be, you can be a historian or you can be an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And we went in as engineers.
Yeah.
It's me and a colleague of mine that we work closely together. We're both interested, so.
So, knowing the controversy that has surrounded the Petrie core, you designed an experiment when you got there to determine whether the Petrie core was a horizontal groove, or
we
if
did.
they were spirals.
First, it requires more than just your eye. You need to have some optics. Some high-powered readers seem to work the best. I'd use a 1 to read a book, but I went to like a 2 reader to see into that, to be able to hold it close to your face. And then we took a thread and rotated and wrapped around the groove, and it was definitely a spiral. It wasn't just me. It was my colleague. I'll mention his name, Josh Gear, also an aerospace engineer. We both witnessed and wrapped that groove. So,
Do you think, and you consider that to be a legitimate way, methodology for determining whether it's a spiral or a
I mean, we rotated. What's my picture got? It's probably got 20 wraps.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 20 observations, a dozen. So
Yeah.
I did a dozen just in this photo. I mean, you could keep going, but you get bored with it. But after a dozen wraps, they were not crossing.
So
I'll show the picture.
Yeah,
This is
that's
what we're doing.
to be honest, I expected you to use a different method because I use that method, but I don't know of a better way to do it, a simpler way to do it.
Well, back to my metrology background, back to building precision machines, the ultimate way is to go in and scan the part with an optical scanner and rebuild it in a
I think
software.
that's the next step, right?
Yeah, that's the way to share it with the world. This is filling out paperwork, getting into the museum, having the parts given to you, and sitting down in the morning. It was like 10 a.m. Taking some pictures, wrapping the cores. It was a fun time, and it's a cool way to do it.
So do you think there's any way that you could have done that examination using that thread? Is there any way that you could have like made a mistake and taken the wrong path and come up with a horizontal groove?
I'd have to make a mistake 12 times on 12 wraps.
Yeah.
And like I said, you get bored with it after that. You're not going to just wrap it all the way.
It becomes redundant, right?
It's like, all right, it's a spiral because the thread's falling in the groove. What else can we look at in this museum?
Yeah.
There's no intent to make any other observation. We hadn't even considered it. It's just we just wrapped it with thread, and all right, this piece makes a spiral. We looked at several others. And, I think we had 10 small cores.
Mm-hmm.
Some were internal,
Right.
and they seem to have spirals too. You can't wrap an internal.
No, you can't.
But with the observation.
But on the outside, you found that they
Yeah.
were spiral.
Yeah.
So, evidently, these guys have not heard about you because I don't see your photograph of that.
It's okay. It's okay.
Scientists Against Myth.
I didn't go there for any publicity of it. I went there for my own
I know.
entertainment in London. I found it very interesting. The Petrie Museum has a lot of unique artifacts.
So let's talk about other methods.
Yeah.
In my book, as you know, I describe the core as a flat blank, or at least an impression of the core as a flat blank.
Right, you had rolled it out.
I'd rolled it out. I'd gotten a latex impression and rolled it out, and then checked the grooves as a flat plane. Would you consider that to be a legitimate method of inspection?
I think it is. I mean, that's you did it with a latex. That's the way we are going to do it when we get a chance to do it with digital.
Right. So
we're gonna lay it out.
That's I got better photographs of that.
Yeah. Again, I mean, we did it with a thread.
Right.
That's not digital. You did it with
right. That's not digital.
Latex. But now we're moving into.
All right.
We're getting advanced.
So Scientists Against Myth, they used a different methodology in inspecting the Petrie core number 7.
Okay.
And their methods were to use a camera and photograph the core at various places around the circumference.
Yeah.
Like so.
I see. Yeah. That gets very difficult.
And so when you do that, you basically have a profile that you're looking at. If you look down, you have a profile that is like that, where you have all these crowns, a crown, a crown, a crown, a crown.
You're
and it's moving.
You're connected to the perspective of your camera.
Right, and you also have an issue with focus and actually the distortion of the grooves.
Oh yeah, that really, you'd have to use a fine line generator, finer than the area that you're going to measure to take the scan.
So that would, the results of that would be very difficult to interpret. I mean, I know in my experience that method has never been used to convey information about geometric features on a cone, aerospace engine part, to convey information to a customer about the geometry of it, because of the those actual issues. But, however, the Scientists Against Myth are proclaiming that this method is superior, and they produce an image that I think is designed to confuse the reader or the viewer of their YouTube video. And so I just wanted to know your perspective.
Yeah.
On that particular arrangement.
There's a possibility of error every time you take another image. If it's not a continuous image being generated, there's an error at every junction. And when you come to the end and you assume that it doesn't align, or it does.
Yeah.
I've worked with precision metrology. I've worked with optical precision metrology, and that is not a method we would ever use to determine.
No, I've never heard of it before.
No, this is something someone has thought of and thinks it's a method, but the method does not exist. This is not a method in metrology.
No.
To take various pictures and glue them together.
There you go, man.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a very good. I think. Yeah, I mean, just a good background for if we were to talk about some of the criticism of. I mean, you and I have been featured, and both of us in some of the videos. It's people that don't have the background that
you mean like
guys
this?
like you do. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I do like the alien spaceships and the rest of it in there.
Yeah, 100 years of deception.
Yeah.
100 years of deception. Out of place artifacts, 100 years of deception. Yeah. So basically that spans Petrie, myself, now you.
Yeah, I'm featured in there.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. That's-
But poor old Eric didn't make the list. So maybe that's Eric with the glasses on the right there.
it possibly. Yeah, I mean,
Alter ego.
yes, and it will look. I mean, I have a particular philosophy about this type of thing on YouTube. You know, it's anytime you're out there, anytime we are, anything's considered controversial. There's going to be some pushback. I think there's always going to be an audience for some of that, and I think some people will play that role no matter what to some extent. So it's have, and I've had plenty of videos made about me and the things that I've said. And look, I came to a decision about arguing on the internet a long time ago.
Oh, me too. Yeah,
kind of a waste of. I mean,
I'm not going to do it.
No, and I mean, I've seen enough of a lot of it to understand that, you know, there's most of the arguments, it's just chock-a-block full of logical fallacies, be them misrepresentations or
Unqualified opinions.
unqualified opinions. Is another one, yes, with people that don't know what they're talking about are going to make it sound like they do. And, you know, and I've also realized that I could spend hours responding to this and pointing it out. It's not going to change their minds. It's just going to generate another response video, which is kind of what they want in the first place. I think a lot of this is trying to get a response. I mean,
Right.
I'm talking about me personally here. And then B, it's just it'll never end. Like they'll do an end run of the goalposts will shift.
All the time.
You will get your point will not be acknowledged, and the argument will move on to something else.
Yeah,
and it's
I've even had there was one poster that posted something and I responded, and I made a really good counter argument, and he responded to my post, but he changed the wording of his post.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and silly games like that.
Oh,
it's kind of, you know, it just gets
happens.
stupid.
It really does, and I've you know, it's funny because I have actually, and I've swapped some emails with some of the people that have made content about me, and I said, look, if we want to have a debate, or we wanted to just have a discussion about these things, like I offer, like, my website, all of my articles, every video's got a comment section on my website. You know, it's not like thousands of comments like you see on YouTube, but there might be dozens.
Yeah.
And it's active, and I do engage there. I'm gonna say, come over and write there, and I will engage you and your points in this fashion on that, you know, on my website, in my comment section. I'm not gonna, there's no censorship or anything. I'm not gonna edit what you say or anything. Nobody's ever done it. Like, it's just, it's what I think what happens, and this is sort of unique to YouTube. It's like, YouTube's a game, right? They're looking for views, they're looking for attention.
Clicks and likes, yeah.
Clicks and likes, and doing this, and I personally find the reaction model content like this, where you're purely taking somebody else's work and tearing it down or criticizing, just reacting to it negatively. I mean, it's just, I think it's lazy. I think it's the lowest form of content on the platform, and I don't respect it. It's not what I do. And I just, I don't like to respond to it because I think it just encourages it. There's no doubt that it works. I just have a philosophical.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
I won't engage with them.
Yeah.
I stopped doing message board discussions.
Me too.
In 2003. I mean, I was very active on the Graham Hancock
Forum.
message board. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's even asked me to, you know, come back and be author of the month next year, and I said I'm not sure I want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I learned that lesson on forums as well back in the day. Yeah, where it's just the nature of arguments, and particularly arguing on the internet. It's like the objective for the other guy isn't to like learn the truth; it's to never lose and to do no matter what. you will change your message to do that. But yeah, I mean, I've seen some truly ridiculous claims levied about from you, like not measuring things incorrectly. All of this stuff, and I note that in your book you did say, like, well then, tell me, and they'll make those statements and say you're wrong, but it's like, then say where and when and what measurements was he wrong at. Just point it out, like let's find out. But you're not going to get to that level with these guys. Like,
yeah, you know, I kind of, I think I understand the connections they are making that drive them to make that conclusion.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's related to what we were discussing earlier about the vases. And that is artifacts, modern or ancient, can have features built into them or crafted into them. Some of the features will be very precise and others won't.
Yeah.
And and it has been the habit of the debunkers. If you say, hey, I noted with a precision square and straight edge that this surface is extremely flat and the underside of the lid is square to the wall of the inside of the box in this area, and this is unbelievable if you consider the time period when this artifact was built. It shouldn't be here, right? Mm-hmm. And then somebody will come along and measure a different part of the box and find something that's imprecise and say, oh, no.
Dunn was wrong.
No,
yeah.
Don't look at that. Look at this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like divert your attention. All the attention is focused on the imprecision.
Yeah, let's measure the outside angles of the box.
Yeah, it's kind of like that surface plate that we were standing around yesterday, right? If we had a calibration technologist who come in to resurface the surface plate, and they have their lapping plate and they autocollimator and they're working away, and then suddenly they get a square and start inspecting the outside of the surface plate. Oh,
the underneath.
It's not quite square here.
The flatness of the underneath of it.
I mean, it just gets to the point of being ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's one. I think it was Ancient Presence.
Yeah, those guys did it.
They were showing photographs of the Asida project going around on the outside, even the lids, and showing variations in the angles. And one of them was like 4 minute or 0.4 degrees. Think about it. You take the worst condition in those boxes.
Yeah.
But take your pick. What do you want it to be? 10 thousandths, 5 thousandths off, a degree off, half a degree off.
Yeah. I'm
still going to say that using the tools in the ancient Egyptian toolbox, you won't be able to create that box. So just forget it.
Yeah, and it's also, as you say, that some of these artifacts will exist with precision in areas and not precision in others, potentially because whatever they were used for, it wasn't needed there. But you can't, if in order to explain the artifact, you have to include the most difficult corner cases, which is the most precise part. You can't. It doesn't matter if it exists with areas that aren't precise. The fact that it does exist with parts of it that are incredibly well done and precise.
Right, you can't.
That doesn't go away just because you're measuring. You're measuring the outside angles of the box, which is like, I don't think they cared about the outside angles of the box. It's just like it's roughly square. What seemed to be important was more.
Yeah, but we're living again in a virtual world now. So
it's true.
Qualifications have nothing to do with it. That's number one.
That's right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, they can.
And so coming to conclusions about what is correct and what isn't correct when you don't have the customer's specifications for what is correct and what is incorrect.
Yeah.
That's another thing. The other thing is that just like in Danville metal stamping, where you were yesterday, you walk through the plant and you'll see parts that are in various stages of production. You'll have rough forgings, you'll have rough machine, you'll have semi-finished machines, and then you'll have final machines. All of them have a specific range or tolerance of precision that is crafted into them.
Yep.
And so if you don't know anything about manufacturing and you go into a manufacturing company and you walk through, everything looks the same.
Yeah.
You're not able to sort it out. And when I look at the Serapeum, you find a box that is rough finished, possibly came from the quarry that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have boxes that are semi-finished.
Yes.
And or at least we can say that they may be semi-finished. It depends what the customer's specifications are.
Right.
If they are the same as in that one box where I found that that really really precise square corner. If they're the same, if they have to reach that level of precision, then you can say, well, these are semi-finished, especially those that don't have a lid on them. Right?
Right.
Because that would be the final process, right? You finish the box, you and then you put the lid on it, and everything is finished.
Make it square, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Then that's actually one of the most remarkable things about that place is that they seem to have been doing a lot of that work down there. Like there's literally, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to be in the back room of the Serapeum, the closed off room, like there's that rose granite box, and then past it's a big set of green doors, and they are always locked, but you can get in there. I've been in there a couple times for special permissions, but there's a giant big black box in there, and it's not polished.
Yeah.
It's at a better state of machining than the box in the hallway.
Right.
Like it's flat, sort of seems square, but it hasn't been polished down to that smooth polished surface. But it developed this giant crack in the back of it, and I think they just parked that thing in the corner.
Oh
and
wow,
said,
really?
We can't use it. Just leave it in here, and then went on with the work on the other boxes. So you have these, different states of finish, and this one's a great one because it's in between kind of the polished surface and the box in the hallway. So
probably like one of those tunnel boring machines, right? We're done with this. We can't use it, so what do? Oh, we just could bury it.
Yeah.
So they build a place to put it.
Yeah, they stuck it. It's literally back. It's one of the biggest boxes there too. I mean, your lid on that thing's easy 30 tons. It's humongous, and it's just tucked into a back corner. Like it's literally, and it's. I'm like, this is some of the other stupid theories I've seen about that place. Well, they were using pulleys and capstans and posts in the ground to lever these boxes around corners, and I'm like, explain how they put it in that corner. Like, where are they pulling? There's no room for pulleys and ways to provide leverage. I mean, there's the claims that are made about that place by some people. It does drive me a little bit batty because, that's not just to get away from the precision for a sec, but, Mariette supposedly found evidence for pulleys.
Right.
And I'm like, if the Egyptians had used pulleys, this would have been a discovery that changed the course of and what we know about the dynastic Egyptian history. And of course it gets interpreted like, oh, they must have been used to move the boxes around. I'm like, how? If you think the Egyptians built this place, they weren't using pulleys. But how do you think the people that came in afterwards were budging the lids off these things? Like, do you think pulleys might have been involved then with all those civilizations that were using pulleys? And somebody clearly came in here and put posts up and were pulling lids off these things. And I mean, there's some really...
I don't really address much the movement.
No, I know.
The lifting and hauling of it, I mean...
But it's in the same category of people making statements about, the evidence that's in there and statements about the boxes without understanding what they're talking about. I think that happens a lot, and it's just and it's mostly done in order to, like, I think, try and throw shade on what is an honest evaluation of what you're seeing there. I think, I mean, I put some of that category, like, you can't. It's very difficult to explain how they were the logistics of that place along with the precision of the boxes.
Right.
And it all sort of tends towards requiring, a more complex solution than just sticks and stones and grinding with sand.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that is it's kind of like different ideologies and beliefs seem to be, clashing, and you have those who cannot accept the idea that previous civilizations were more advanced than what we think they were, and then associated with that is an attempt to minimize the importance of what has been discovered about them, and then that leads up to defaming and slandering the people who would actually take measurements and publish them.
Yes. How dare you?
And make those claims. So, I got an is a text message. It was from an engineer in Indianapolis, and he had seen a video called "Lies Told About Atlantis" or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And in this video, there is a photograph of me inside the box, the Serapeum, and written above in the lid, kind of, are the words, "fudging and faking measurements."
Oh, for fuck.
And he was pissed.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. He was like, he was steamed for days after that. And so he sent me a message, sent me the image, and I'm like, oh geez, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's the unfortunate reality of, I think, when you put these things out there, you put yourself out into the public space, and in the world we live in today, that
Right.
some of that negative attention is going to come.
Yeah. So
you know,
then you also got this guy. I don't. My first fraud. That's me. That's my photograph again. So there, he's having a go at me right there.
I hadn't seen that one.
Yeah. Right. But the thing that really upset me the most was this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this a professor, a college professor, who's saying, "Why look to the expertise of century-old scholars rather than contemporary ones?" So he's cancelling out Petrie.
Yes. Yeah.
He's probably cancelling out myriad at the same time, and all the others that were there at that time.
Yeah. Well, Petrie in particular, I always considered him, I'm sure you think the same way, as the first guy to really use an engineering approach
Right.
on these sites.
But yeah, that was. But the entire piece I couldn't watch it all. I just watched the first part of it, and I was like. So basically, the way he guides his viewers is to cancel out Petrie, all right, and say we don't have to listen to him, and then forget modern engineers. Oh, I think your name was beat up a little bit.
He spent plenty of time with my name in his mouth. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So and then don't listen to modern engineers unless they are being guided by archaeologists, modern archaeologists and historians. And then essentially he says that, well, there's only one core that had a spiral on it, and so we can safely dismiss that. So basically he's cancel me, cancel Petrie, cancel you, and then cancel the core. So let's move on.
Well, yeah, he's catering to a specific audience in a lot of ways, and it's funny, I left a comment. Someone left me a comment that I thought was very apt, and he said he left it on one of his videos and it got deleted, which I'm not surprised at. Which was, although this guy in particular sort of purports to be open-minded, this somebody who looked at every one of their videos, and not once, not a single occasion did he end up disagreeing in any way, shape or form with what you might consider the mainstream perspective on any topic that he talks about. Every single time it's been sided with what's in the academic textbook and from the archaeologists and the historians.
Yeah.
Every single time. I mean...
Yeah, but you know what, though? I'll tell you something.
Might be representing a perspective, yeah.
No, I'll tell you something. His material, everything that he has laid out in that video was laid out on the Graham Hancock website message board years ago.
Yeah, I know.
Same sources,
same nonsense,
same ridiculous arguments, and it's not original. He is totally unoriginal.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of his videos about me are mostly my videos. Like it's a reaction model. It's the same thing. Yeah, it falls into the category of like I couldn't be bothered responding to making a video because he'll make another video. I mean, all I had to do.
Then you're going to have dueling videos, right?
That's stupid. Yeah, and that's what he wants. He wants
the controversy.
He wants to my audience, and I think it's a kind of a gross
form of coattail riding and clout chasing. It's nonsense. But it's, I mean, all I had to do was see, like, in one of the first videos I think he'd made about one of my videos, he's like, oh, clearly, it might have been about, I can't even remember what it was. It was some architecture, but he said, clearly he hasn't read this book. And it's like, he showed a picture of like Dieter Arnold's building in Egypt. And he's, oh yeah, if he looked in here, he'd be the answers. And it's like, in that same video he's criticizing, I literally show a copy of the book and I quote from it.
Right.
And I have a copy of that book. And it's like, how am I going to argue against this? I have to sit here and spend 20 minutes.
I mean, it's just lies. You know, the other one that I noted was that he was implying that you had not accessed Galal Hassan.
Right.
Right. And he was showing his papers, but I doubt that he'd even read Galal Hassan. Because if he had, he would have seen my name all over his papers. Right. You know, and even lately in his latest paper, Galal Hassan dedicated it to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Shocker. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, yeah. And you know, the assuming, you know, a certain purity, academic purity, in wanting to control the message. I think that education needs to revise its methods in terms of how they study ancient cultures. Because I am going out into the field as a craftsman, and I'm learning that they were counterparts to me existing in the ancient past.
Yeah.
Right?
Must have been.
Must have been counterparts, my counterparts in the ancient past. And the people who are given the responsibility to analyze those artifacts that I've identified are not qualified to do so. Not only that, they reject any efforts by people like me to teach them.
Yeah.
To say, hey, yeah, come to the shop. Come to the shop. We'll show you around, and you know, you can get a feel for what we're doing. There was one debater on Graham Hancock, and he was saying, well, you need to take a course in Egyptology. And I said, well, it would probably be good, considering the subject we're talking about, that if you went and took an industrial arts class or something like that.
Or one in metrology, perhaps. Yes.
Yeah, right, metrology. Well, hey, we've rattled on enough about that.
Well, yes, but you're right, and I would sort of close that with saying that it's, I'd probably bring it full circle and say that the Vase work that's happened, and certainly the Vase videos, has generated some interest also from some of the people we've just talked about, and I can only imagine the angst that the new work, the scans, the metrology, the inspections that we've been doing is going to cause, and I'm very much looking forward to putting some of that stuff together, because a certain somebody who has criticized that vase work and calling vases a fake, and then showing examples of purported, this is a real vase with real provenance. One of the examples he used in that video just so happens to be in the collection of one of our very friendly vase owners who has it himself, and we will be getting a full inspection and report on that particular vase that is a quote-unquote real vase, according to one of his armchair experts. Yes, so the one that he said, this is a real vase with real provenance, and it just so happens that somebody actually purchased that vase, and we've got our hands on it. So
I think it just becomes profoundly ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you have commenters who are saying, well, the holes in the lugs on the vase are slightly off. They're not symmetric, so
therefore, dismiss the whole thing. Yeah.
Dismiss the whole thing. Not even trying to understand the engineering and the math, or dismissing Mark Viss's brilliant analysis. I mean, you know, it's like lights out.
Yep.
The best I've ever seen.
Yeah, Mark's work on the vases, it was fantastic, and mind-blowing, and it's very difficult to argue with his conclusions, I think. Well, it's interesting because I think this is something that has been
certainly I got from your new book that's coming out in, is it February or January? January 23rd on 2024. Giza, the Tesla Connection, wonderful book. I had the chance to read it. Thank you for giving me the chance to read it.
I appreciate your comments on it.
Oh yeah, I loved it. And we can talk more about it. I definitely want to get into other things in the books, but while we're talking about sort of an engineering-oriented investigation into artifacts in Egypt, this is a theme that I saw in your book, and it's certainly a theme that I picked up on yesterday, was that you said this a few times, like the engineers in Egypt are starting to take over.
Yeah,
like and that seems to be a very encouraging sign for, you know, a number of reasons, in terms of they're able to embrace some of these things and potentially take control of their own history, which it hasn't really come from them. If you look at the history of how we've said what the history of Egypt is, it's not exactly come from Egyptians in the past.
Right, from Westerners,
Yeah.
This has been very gratifying for me, because in the Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, which was published in 2010, I put out a challenge and encouraged Egyptian engineers to go and examine the artifacts that I talk about and report on their findings. And that started to happen with Ahmed Adli, who is an Egyptian engineer. And he went into the Serapeum and came out saying, well, Chris, it looks like Chris was right, because of the measurements he took. But he also reported at the time that his channel has drawn millions of viewers. And
he makes great videos.
He makes great videos. He's a very humble guy and very kind. And, you know, even with people who may get a little heated, he's always very calm.
Look, even in Arabic, I mean, he's just, you can, I watch them even though they're in Arabic. There's some auto translation you can do on a few of them, but he's bringing these topics to the Arabic speaking world in a great way on YouTube. I love his videos.
And they love him. I mean, they just demand, they want more. The Egyptians are really picking up on this now. And and now he's interfacing with some of the leads on the Scan Pyramid project. Also,
excellent.
Also the Jedi team for the robot exploration. And so, you know, his and he got a call from a physicist at Cairo University, and so he was invited to Cairo University to talk to this physicist about the Giza power plant theory of the pyramid as a machine. And that seems to crack the nut. It was like everybody's now looking at the pyramids as a machine rather than a tomb. And he's getting emails from Egyptian Egyptologists who are saying the tomb theory it's a dead theory.
Really.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's just, like I said,
it's amazing.
Because it's I think it's probably fair to say in the Western world and in established, this is, you know, something I know Graham Hancock talks about a lot, but, you know, established, entrenched academia is going to be resist. I mean, it's the nature of establishment to resist change.
Right.
But as the gatekeepers of that official story of what ancient Egypt is or was, I mean, obviously other places too, but ancient Egypt particularly, that's generally been the province of kind of Western academia to some extent. I mean, certainly in the history of Egyptology, it's all come out of the West. And I hope, and I'd love to see the Egyptians take control of this themselves and potentially use it as a chance to take an open-minded look at what the evidence is and even rewrite what would essentially be their own history and take it maybe a little bit out of the hands of kind of the...
Well, you know, I met with Hamada Anwar and Dr. Haney Halal. They were leads on the Scan Pyramid. Well, they were supervisors of the Scan Pyramids project. Haney is a rock engineer.
Right.
So, you know, his specialty is rock. And I had a meeting with them, and, you know, in the past I'd always had some resistance. Like the first time I went to Egypt, I I gave some official at the Cairo Museum a copy of my article, Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, and he threw it in a drawer and said, "Good day." and that was it.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like when I met Zahi Hawass, so I just like, I didn't even talk to him about, I didn't give him that.
Theories, yeah.
I just didn't bother. But Haney asked me, he said, well, could we restore the Great Pyramid so that it's functional again? And I was thinking, I can't believe I'm hearing this question.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'd never considered it before, and I'd always rejected the idea in the past. But now here we have some high official in Egypt saying, "Hey, could we restore the Great Pyramid?" And I got to thinking about that.
Really?
I write about it in my book, but I got to thinking about that, and that when you consider what it would take to actually build one from scratch, you have 6 million tons of stone that you're going to have to quarry, and you have to quarry it very, very precise.
Yeah, some site preparation required.
Site preparation, certainly wouldn't be done with a string.
No,
no,
you're not slapping chalk lines down here to sort this out. Yeah,
but then
work.
Entertaining the question further, and I was thinking, they've already got the bulk of the stone there. We won't need to have to quarry. Why dismiss the idea? Why not encourage it?
Yeah.
But then the other question is, as far as making it a functional machine again, it would mean taking some of it apart, removing parts of it, and repairing parts of it.
Yep. Yeah.
Like the King's Chamber and other areas of the Great Pyramid would need to be refurbished and
plug up a few of the tunnels we've dug around the place in the meantime, right?
Yeah. But that was the engineers, and the Egyptian mind is turning more towards the reality that their ancestors were much more advanced than what they've been given credit for.
Yeah.
And they're liking that.
Well, and I got to say, I know you lay a lot of this out in the new book. A central theme of it has been you using new information, new scientific research, new discoveries like the Scan Pyramids project that I think most people watching this should be aware of, to update that theory of the power plant. Can you give us a quick overview of what you can expect to see in there? I do love the use of, I think it's the projects like the Scan Pyramid project, the resonance and earthquake studies that have happened in the time since you published the first book. Right. And all of that's factoring into a kind of updated and more comprehensive theory for the pyramid, right?
Yeah, the basic theory is really the backbone of it, and obviously over the years I've been tuned into discussions, objections to the theory or part of the theory, and so there was several points that I knew that I had to make in the book to address the criticism that has been put out in the universe, and one of them was the existence of quartz and how it was solely functioned for electron flow in the King's Chamber
using piezoelectricity.
Right. And so I was aware that was a weak kind of argument because of the orientation of quartz and how it needs to be stressed across a particular axis in order for electrons to flow. And then in 2018 on a tour, there was a geologist who was studying the granite at Aswan. And he said, well, it doesn't look like this granite even has 50% quartz or even 30%. He's looking at maybe 20% quartz. So
20% quartz.
So the percentage of quartz is lower and the orientation is random. So that kind of weakened that theory entirely. Well, that all changed in 2019 when Robert Vorter,
Yes.
who passed away the other week, unfortunately. But Robert Vorter made contact with a physicist at NASA. His name was Friedemann Freund. Robert had been poking around the internet trying to get information on piezoelectric and, trying to investigate further the nature of igneous rocks and what they do. So he came across Friedemann Freund, who had been doing research on earthquake lights.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So Friedemann had actually developed this, or discovered in his studies, that the minerals in igneous rock have what he calls peroxide defects, that when stressed, you would have positive charge electrons that will shoot to the surface of the Earth. Right?
And that's what...
So, yeah, it's like positive holes that actually are released and they just shoot up to the surface. But the nature of them is that they seek the highest point of the topography. And they show up as earthquake lights.
Yeah, because it ionizes the air.
Right. It ionizes the air,
and you get a light.
You have these light shows.
Yeah.
And so his hope was that he would be able to identify a method and where the coming earthquakes will be detected days before they actually occurred, because he noted that these earthquake lights show up days before.
Because the rock's being stressed. So
right,
the pressures
it's being
are building.
stressed and they're shooting to the surface. And, there was one earthquake in Italy at Aquila that lit up, the hillside lit up days before the earthquake happened. Yeah. And so he gave a presentation in Christchurch, New Zealand, which is an appropriate place to talk about earthquakes, right?
True.
And so I would recommend anybody, access that. It's a TEDx talk.
Okay.
Just go on YouTube. And
I will do that. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. So I'm thinking, well, all right. So he has identified the physics behind earthquake lights, and it's he relates it to semiconductor physics, and and then he said it's new, it's exciting, and he was very enthused about the whole thing. Unfortunately, the seismologists have not picked up on it yet. Hopefully they will in the future.
Okay.
But
interesting.
I certainly picked up on it, and I was like, hey, we're looking for a source of electrons.
Right.
Then we're there right under our feet.
Right.
Because what he said is that when igneous rock in the earth, when stressed, the rock turns into a battery. Right. So essentially, we have a battery. We're standing on top of a battery, which, is dormant at the right now, but it can be excited to be active, and you can access electricity from it, right? And then I kind of connected that with the pyramids, obviously, and because there have been reports in the past of electrical phenomena around the pyramids.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
yes.
I met him in 2021, I think.
Vorter.
I met Friedemann Freund.
Oh, Friedemann. Okay, the guy at NASA.
Yeah.
Right.
Really, really nice guy. We were supposed to have an hour meeting with him, and it lasted about 2.5 hours. So he's a very interesting guy. Very interesting guy.
Yes. Yeah, it's been great to read about that in the book and update those series. And as we talked about the piezoelectricity, I love the fact that there's new science coming in to update it, and that you're sort of using that also to look back at what you've said in the past and bring it up to date.
Right.
I would say also that that I very much enjoyed the chapter you wrote about the Serapeum in this book. It's not all about the pyramid. There is just, I thought, a wonderful chapter on the Serapeum. And again, I don't really need to spoil it for people that can read it, that can buy the book and read it, because I very much enjoyed, I guess, the speculation of the possible that you went into in that chapter. And it struck home to me because you were, I think, shining a light on something that I often try to explain when it comes to technology and looking back at the past at a potential, use case or function or anything to do, if just looking at the past through the lens of technology and our tendency to kind of use the blinkers in the context of our current understanding of it. Like our own technological capabilities, we kind of look at everything in the past as it has to be a subset of what we see at this point in time.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that's not the right context to look at this stuff is, because we know in 100 years or 1,000 years we'll know more, our scope will be broader, our context and perspective will be broader, and it seems to me entirely possible that it may have been broader in different directions than we have right now in the past, and we kind of lack the context, I think, to really understand, or it's a possibility that we lack the context to understand what we're looking at, and you do kind of explore some of those avenues in this. I'd say that about that chapter in Serapeum. I just want to say that I really enjoyed that chapter. So
yeah, thanks. It was the interesting thing, the way the book developed. It was like I find myself in a headspace where the past was rushing forward and the future was rushing backwards, and I was stuck right in the middle. And I'm like, I'm looking in the past, and it seems so close, and I'm also looking in the future, because you see what happens in the past and how it affects how we exist today.
Right.
And what we do today will affect how people exist in the future. So it was like I was in that headspace, but I was also in a headspace where I became much more convinced of the correctness of just the concept of an advanced civilization. Not necessarily that I have explained it with any degree of perfection or efficiency. That nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. But I had my mindset was, okay, unlike when I wrote my first article, Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, and I put a question mark on it.
Yeah.
There's no question mark in my mind now.
I did notice that too, and you steered, even in your other books, your earlier books, you sort of steered away from saying an advanced civilization that might have been different to the dynastic Egyptians as we know it.
Right.
So and has that so that's changed for you, or is that a perspective on?
I think the to say that I don't use my imagination in my writing, I think Chapter 9 would put that to the lie, right?
It will. Yes, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, but but basically, what I've always done is I've always tried to stay in my lane.
Right.
And I've always respected the culture that I'm studying.
Right.
So and trying to connect with the people who are my counterparts. Okay. So I'm walking in a field of precision machine blocks, and I'm like, okay, what were you doing? Trying to think, come on, I need some inspiration here. Let me know, guide me, let me know what I'm doing.
Yep.
Show me what to do next. Where do I go now?
Yeah.
And and it's maybe it's just a silly game I play, but it does put me in a mental space where I am respecting the people that came before us.
Yes.
And what they accomplished.
Yes. Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah.
Right. And I think that is the most important thing.
Yep.
Is that people have a tendency to go out, go outside of their environment and then bluster through a foreign country, complaining about everything.
Yeah.
Because it's just not quite like it was at home.
Well, yes, yeah, I see that too. I travel a lot too, and yeah,
It
it's just
reminds
like,
me of when I was growing up in England, and the joke there was a couple had come home from vacation on the continent. How was your vacation? Oh, it was fine, but there's too many bloody foreigners there.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. I would encourage anybody that travels to just take a step back. It's not the same everywhere, and yeah, respect the place you're in and the cult and the. You'll have a better time that way too. You'll if
You will. Yeah.
just getting on board with the cultures there. They're usually cultures that they make sense for. They do them for a reason, and yeah, I try to follow that same. Same advice. Respect the place you're in and its history, and
Right.
I mean, it's a criticism I've received is like, oh, you're taking it's by suggesting that there was a more advanced culture or a civilization. It's like somehow taking something away from the Egyptians. I'm like, no, it's in Egypt. It's still Egyptians. Like it's just it's everybody's. It's their ancestors. Like I think the timelines are a little off. It's not. I don't think it's taking anything away from them.
We're being disrespectful to the pyramid builders
by saying they didn't build them with sticks and stones.
By saying that they were more advanced than what we're giving them credit for.
Exactly. Yeah. Same thing.
That's disrespectful.
Apparently,
yeah.
Same thing in South America. Honestly, I get the same thing. It's like, oh, you're saying the Inca can't do it. I'm like, it's just there's a
Not saying we can't do it. Obviously, they can. It's just a matter of how.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Just when you any civilization, if they go through a huge cataclysm, and they're brought to their knees, all of their monuments are destroyed. Their civilization is in tatters, much of it decimated, killed, and you have a few survivors. And then from those few survivors, they kind of claw their way back. And with no hope at all of restoring what used to be.
Yep.
And so then they just subsist off the land from that point on.
Yeah.
And then a foreign power like the Europeans or the Americans come in and they see how they're living and how they're able to or what they're doing to survive, and they just assume that in that particular area that those were the methods and means that have been used forever, because they don't see they see progress as linear in terms of our history, right? Mm-hmm. So you go from the the cavemen to us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it may have been some steps before the caveman, I think.
Yeah, I mean the ups and downs or the dips, and they're basically different cultures or civilizations rising and falling a little bit, but certainly due to political reasons or egotistic leaders and taking us into war.
Right.
But civilization still keeps going. I mean, you go from the development of technology, the Europeans, the English particularly, and then importing that technology to America and development of American manufacturing, and then developing, the manufacturing in Japan, and then it's just spread all throughout the Pacific Rim.
Right.
And there's no country in the world now that doesn't know how to manufacture.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's been a relatively rapid spread.
It's been a rapid spread. Yeah. But in the process, there's like fortunes won, fortunes lost. So,
right.
The English, they're
up and down.
They're lost.
I guess this is true. Yeah. Okay.
I was going to talk about a little more about the book.
We'll get into the book, yeah. I'm happy to.
But anyway, this is a clarification of what I call the wave guide, and then further understanding of how wave guides are made, how they function, and Also, pointing out that the entrance point into the King's Chamber is at the quarter wave point. So where you have like a standing wave in a resonant cavity,
Mm-hmm.
the quarter wave would be a place where the amplitude would be the highest, right? And then, when you talk about why does it wrap around the gallery, and I get into that a little bit and talk about the fact that it doesn't have to bend at all,
Right.
because if you look at it from the top, you can see that it would miss the Grand Gallery wall by about 3 feet, 40 inches, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't need a bend. It could go straight out. Why does it have to have a bend? Well, there may be two reasons, and there may be a combination of both. One would be that the walls of the Grand Gallery were so thick that they didn't want to breach, the walls. It would be too difficult to do that, to put a rectangular passageway through it, or shaft through it. And the other one is that Eric Wilson has been so helpful to me in terms of his knowledge of microwave guides and electronics and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I mean, this book wouldn't exist without having some extremely brilliant and smart people who were helping and coming up with different ideas and answering questions that I have. One of the questions on the bends was to Eric, and I said, well, if you look at that, you have 1 bend, 2 bends, 3 bends, 4 bends coming out of the King's Chamber. Whereas why 4 bends? You could have just 2.
2 and much more simple.
And reach the same thing. And he said, well, that's because waveguides they put multiple bends in and other kinds of features to modify the trajectory of the beam and stuff like that. And so it's like, yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And then there are other features further up. And then I put in the
horn,
microwave horn antenna, right?
Yep.
So that is
beautiful fan that Gatenbrink installed, but just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a piece of art, that fan, but yeah.
That doesn't work anymore?
No, it doesn't run at all.
Well, they ought to replace it.
They should do something. I think they should just take it out of the way so we can see what's in there. Yeah.
Well, maybe they will. Who knows?
I mean, that place is. I'd love it if they would, but I doubt it.
Right.
I mean, It was funny. The King's Chamber. you go into the back corner of that place, and there's a big steel plate in the floor where they've excavated in there, and they've got the air conditioning machine sitting on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, this was this was noted in 2001, 3 years after the book was published.
The Helmholtz resonators and the Grand Gallery.
The scorch marks on the ceiling of the Grand Gallery.
Yeah, when they cleaned it, yes.
Yeah. That's an interesting story because there was all kinds of rumors on the internet that they closed the pyramid so Zai Hawass could dig a hole from his bathroom or gain access to the Canterbury store.
Yeah. Well, they closed it again this year for a month or so. I mean, I suspect for cleaning, but I'm looking forward to getting back there because I'm going to be looking up at the top of the Grand Gallery with a big torch to see if any holes have appeared that may have been looking for a purported void.
Right.
Yeah.
So I kind of look at that as confirmation of the explosion hypothesis of the King's Chamber.
Well, even the King's Chamber has the granite is discolored. I mean, I'm sure you mentioned this too, but you can you come out of the King's Chamber, and as it comes out around the whatever they call it, the entryway. What do they call it? The with the portcullis room or whatever. But
the antechamber.
The antechamber. So it comes as the granite turns around, it's all discolored in there, and then it changes color around the corner. So it's as if there was this discoloration or effect coming from the king's chamber. Yeah. And it's also true that there's been an expansion in the king's chamber.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Petrie noted that.
Yeah.
In his studies, right? Over an inch or something.
Something like that. Yeah. In all directions.
Right. Yeah, something that was going on there. And then when you consider that other parts of the pyramid are really precise, so you don't see any of that kind of activity in the Queen's Chamber.
No.
Or the descending passage,
which is very precise.
Is straight within the thickness of a thumbnail, over 150 feet. I mean,
crazy.
Yeah, I mean it's just nuts.
Yeah, as if there was an overpressure event or something in the King's Chamber. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, and then I go out on a limb.
The Tesla dome.
And that was something like, okay, so the Tesla connection is is basically the priming pulse in the subchamber, and then the stimulation of electron flow from the lithosphere, and then as it goes through the pyramid, it's attracted to the pyramid,
and it would go to the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, and then or even points on the outside. I can envision that, you may have contact points from like a Tesla dome, like the Wardencliffe Tower arrangement, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Wardencliffe Tower.
Right.
So Zenneck surface waves. You familiar with that whole story? The
what?
Zenneck surface waves. There was it's another technology, the theory of electromagnetic wave propagation.
No, I'm not familiar with
Well, so there was, it's one of the theorized reasons behind what he was doing in Wardencliffe potentially. And there's a company in Texas that actually built one. They're called Vase Technologies. They've gone broke now because they couldn't get it past regulation, but they were, everything, electromagnetic wave, everything we do today is based on Hertzian wave theory, right? Where it's, wires and unshielded wires and antenna, etc., gives off radiation. But Zenneck surface waves is an alternative method. It was originally thought to be bunk because the math didn't work, and then it was looked at again and proven out, and then there were some experiments done on a lake surface, but you can use essentially the interface of I'm going to mess up the description of it, but the interface between the air and essentially the ground, and create a surface wave that encompasses the whole planet. And this is kind of what they built in Texas. Vase built what they call a global test site, and they built, it looks like it's the top, it's like a bit more modern looking, but they built a Tesla tower in Texas, and they call it their global test site, and they could go anywhere in the world and stick a receiver into the ground and receive a signal.
Wow.
Or power from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's maybe we can talk a bit more about it after the podcast. But interesting tech like that. That was a whole.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of research going on.
Yeah.
But that's what inspired that, and what inspired the title of the book was because in the subchamber I envisioned that there was the earthquake machine that Tesla designed.
You're right. Well, the oscillating thing that he had to destroy before he knocked down a building. And
And so that was in the subchamber, and then the handshaking of the electrons that was going on in the structure of the dome above it.
Right.
And I didn't share with you the work by Freund. He tested his theory in the lab, so it's not just all physics and theoretical stuff. He set up a granite block in his lab and put it in a hydraulic press.
Right.
And then I put pressure on it. He had a copper cap on the opposite end.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a photograph of it somewhere here. Maybe. No. Oh dear. Well, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm interested to hear about it.
But anyway, I can send you the photographs.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, but essentially, he had shown that there was electron flow when the
Granite was stressed.
the granite was stressed, and he noted that it didn't need that much movement in order to activate it. Only a couple of angstroms, not much at all.
Yeah.
And if he left it in the press, electrons would continue to flow for a long period of time. So it wasn't just an initial kind of
Right.
Specific amount, right? And you're done. It's like, okay, shoot, that's it. Lights on, lights off. It's like that. Those electrons would flow
Keep going.
for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So that's very exciting.
It is. Yeah, and is it possible also that this mechanism at the Great Pyramid could be used to potentially mitigate earthquakes? Did I recall that was a concept you might have explored in it? Like, is it as almost like are you removing stress from the
I actually
on what scale? I don't know how that works, but is it a possibility?
I actually made that speculation in the Giza power plant.
That's right. Yeah.
And I did expand on it in my latest book. Okay. And it's actually while I was speculating that without knowing if anybody else in the world was even thinking about it, let alone publishing on it. Evidently, there were some people thinking about it, and even Tesla made comments that they could be used to mitigate earthquakes.
Yeah.
Right. I actually brought it up to Friedman and Freund, and his eyes just popped. He's like, "What?"
Imagine that environmentally friendly power plant that is also mitigating massive natural disasters. That's solving some problems.
Yeah. The thing is that Friedman is in his 80s now, so he's slowed down quite a bit. But he has an office and a lab at the SETI Institute.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yep.
So he still teaches and keeps busy. Great guy.
That's cool.
But an unsung hero right now. His work needs to be more accessible to the general population, I think. We could just talk a little bit about, philosophically, when you enter this kind of field and the periods that you go through, periods of great enthusiasm and excitement and inspiration, and then, you're putting it out there and talking about it, and just about, I think it was like 2014, 15, something like that. I was just like, okay, I'm done.
Yep.
I'm retired.
Said my piece.
I've said my piece. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. And so I got busy doing other things, And 2017 came around, and I was working on this theater. So, and then as I was, retired and enjoying Netflix, I learned about all this activity on Lost Technologies on YouTube. I'm like, what? And it's like, oh shit. What's going on? And I was like, I need to get involved. I need to get out there. I need to have a YouTube channel. I need to. And it's like, and so I ultimately, I investigated that, and I decided, I said, hey, if all these people are talking about it, they don't need me talking about it, and it's time to hand the reins over to the younger generation, because nobody wants to listen to an old guy anymore.
I do.
Yeah. Well,
I make a habit of it, actually.
You have these hip and with it YouTube content creators, and they can I mean, there's so many of them, and I think it's great. The citizen reporting, citizen investigation, and citizen science, if it's done properly, is enormously valuable.
yeah, it's a new media landscape in a lot of ways, and that was the reason that I both saw an opportunity and wanted to get into it, because I thought that there was no good, like there was, a lot of the very interesting aspects and the work that had been done on these topics that I was interested in is typically buried in books. And I love books, like I read, but not everybody does. And there was a huge portion of the population that isn't getting their information necessarily from books, or they might just have a passing interest in a topic and not willing to invest the 30 hours or whatever it takes to read a book. And it's like there's this, you've got the surface level stuff that comes out from sort of the major networks. You don't have this fresh, it's not like an in-depth look at some of these topics and these sites. And then on the other hand, you've got these books and these really interesting ideas and new science that's happening in a lot of cases. So I was like, there's room here to combine these things, like to say, let's take a fresh look at these sites, go and collect our own footage and things like that, and then tease out and explore some of these ideas that are in books like yours and guys like Graham Hancock and everybody else that are
Right.
exploring these things in depth. And that's kind of the role that I wanted to. That's where I started with it. Like that's what I was
Right,
trying to do,
right.
and essentially report on this stuff as well. As I see myself in
Right.
a similar role. Like I'm not doing primary
Well,
research.
I mean,
I'm
it's
reporting on it.
Obviously, there has always been more people who don't read books than those that do.
Yes. Yeah.
And, to say that everybody has to read the book in order to access the information, I think that's wrong. With most people accessing YouTube and social media now,
Right.
I think there has to be good information shared that way the people can learn from. I mean, they're thirsty for information.
Yep.
They're not going to pick up your book. Some people might, you
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
But the same people are not going to pick up your day. Their counterparts didn't pick up your book 30 years ago,
Right.
right? And they didn't have any of this information. So I prefer that they have at least a little bit of information about it than none at all.
Yeah.
And I think YouTube and social media, if used properly, is a huge benefit to society.
Fantastic.
It's not going away.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, no, definitely not going away. And I look at it as like look, you could be endlessly distracted with nonsense if that's what you want. Like,
Right.
and entertain yourself without ever learning a damn thing. But on the same time, if you want to learn it, and I use it like this all the time, if I need to learn how to do something or a skill or a topic, I mean, and there is a danger that you can be misinformed on some of those skills and topics, but in general, you will have a wealth of information that's at your fingertips to educate yourself or learn something, learn a skill. Like I do it, I mean, I live in a rural area, so I'm constantly like, how do I renovate a bathroom, this and that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And it's, I think it's just changed the fabric of our
Well, I think
world.
it's a
and
very
it's,
positive thing when you
Yeah.
consider that, the use of media, generally, Hollywood, had control of that.
Yeah.
And that's how information was shared, and that's how people were entertained.
Yep.
And this generation, their bullshit detectors are so finely tuned now. They're like turning away from that stuff.
Big media, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And looking for something more authentic.
I agree. I think that's what's happening. I mean,
Yeah.
trust me, big media is trying to get involved, and they're doing their best to control some of this. But it's it's the wild, wild west, right? In terms of information right now, I like the period of time we're in, because I feel like we're in our technological infancy in a lot of ways. And
Right.
And
The only thing is that I think that if I was, if my career was in new media and a particular topic, would be, okay, when is this wave gonna peak, and
right.
when am I gonna have to start, looking at some other topics to discuss?
Yeah, I haven't. If for me personally on that topic, I don't
I mean, there's a lot of other topic areas that I would love to get into at some point, but I'm not, by no means do I feel like this topic area is done yet. I mean,
This
is going to go on for a minute.
This will go for decades.
And I'm fascinated with it, and I only do it. I mean, at the end of the day, I make. There's a lot of traps if you're making and you're trying to exist in this world, and it's what a lot of people want to be doing. Like nowadays, you ask kids what they want to do. They want to be social media influencers, or they want to make YouTube videos and things like this. It's too bad. Like back in the day, they probably wanted to do what their fathers were doing before them.
Right.
Or they all want to be a celebrity or something now. But there's traps. It's a tough game. And I think if you get into it for the wrong reasons, or if you try to pander to an audience too much. I mean, I try to definitely just like, I'm making it ultimately to make myself happy, and I can do something where I'm basically satisfied with what I'm saying.
That is a very good point, because I've noticed that there are some of these YouTube channel owners who will cater to the taste of their
That's
viewers.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a huge mistake.
I do too.
I think it's a huge mistake.
Yep. I make them to be satisfied with myself with them, and I'm also extremely, I think, privileged, and I'm grateful that other people seem to like it too.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
And some of them hit better than others, but that's fine. I mean, some of my favorite videos that I've done don't have the most views out of the ones that I've got, or whatever that means. I don't know. But yeah, it's a weird existence, but it's a fun spot to be, and I think it gives a lot of people a lot of opportunity to learn stuff about it.
Yeah, you got to have a certain strength of intestinal fortitude.
Well, you're over the target.
You got
I'd say.
thick skin.
You're meeting resistance, you know you're over the target.
I'm not that thick-skinned.
Yeah.
I put on an appearance of being sober.
Yeah.
Some of this bullshit really affects me.
Yes, unfortunately, I understand. I certainly paid a lot more attention to it back in the day. I've been received plenty of it myself, and it's just, you can't. I genuinely go, and this is something I heard Joe Rogan say too, and I couldn't imagine the amount of bullshit guys like him at that level of celebrity might endure. Look, you can't really read the bad, you can't really read the good. Like, you just pretty much got to ignore it and stay and do your thing and be happy with it yourself. And people are going to react one way or the other, and I mean, to some extent, at least in this YouTube world, it's like getting a reaction is kind of better than not getting a reaction, even if it's a bad one. So, I just look, I don't pay much attention to it, to be honest. Good or bad, I try to keep and just stay in my lane and do what I got to do.
Stay the course and be like the camel, let the yapping ducks fall on the wayside.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, but I personally, I think your contribution to this is phenomenal. Like, you are the guy that moved this along on the heels of Petrie a long way. I think lost technologies and the Giza power plant theory, I think, will be treated with and given the respect they deserve ultimately, because I think we're on that path now where that theory and the concepts that you're proposing, and you did sort of primary research on a lot of these areas, I think it's going to prove out over time, and become indisputable, and then these will be recognized. I think this work will be recognized for the path. I mean, you started that whole thing for a lot of people, so yeah, I'm super grateful for the work that you've done, and for taking the time to speak with me, because I consider you a friend now, and it's like I've been privileged enough to get to know you and meet you, and
I think it's. I mean, it's always a very positive thing when people can get together in person and discuss a matter, which is why I like the format of the YouTubers or the podcasters who will do contact interviews. You know, like Joe Rogan or like Daniel Jones.
Danny does a great job. Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
I need a studio, damn it.
Yeah, you need a studio.
Well, I have one just for me, but I need to start bringing people.
But then you're going to have to start spending a little money to fly people.
Well, yeah. Look, I'm not a podcaster though either. Like, I do these occasionally. I make content.
Yeah, you're a researcher.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, speaking of
reporter.
that, your guide in Egypt is give a shout out to
Yusuf Awan.
Yusuf
Yes.
Awan.
He's the man.
He's a great guy.
He's excellent. Yes, I'm going to be seeing Yusuf in about a month here, so
Yeah,
I
well-
talk to him frequently. Like me and Yusuf are very close. So.
Yeah, tell him I said hi.
I will. Absolutely. You get mentioned by him every time we're in Egypt. We talk about the time he stood there with you, and this is what you said about it, and he uses you a lot on our tours. So.
Yeah, he's a good guy for sure.
He is. Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Got a good heart.
He is. He's one of the most generous people I've ever met.
Yeah.
He genuinely is. So. Yeah. He loves his country, and yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's a lot of good people in Egypt, and the Aoyam family, they're great. I've had a relationship with them since 1999.
Yeah.
All very good people.
Yep.
Shahzad came to visit me in the hospital when I went down in Egypt in 2007.
Oh.
Right, and they're always very hospitable. And
Yep. I love those guys, all of them. So.
yeah.
All right. Chris Dunn, thank you very much.
Well, no, pleasure's
Cheers.
all mine.
Awesome.
You're all right for an Aussie.
Ah, thank you. Thank you, yes.